So I'm going to start with a easy question. I think most of us, we've been working in Southern European ecosystems for at least 4 or 5 years now. And I would love to hear your take on how would you describe what it looked like 4 or 5 years ago, what the ecosystem looked like 4 or 5 years ago, and how it looks now. Because I get all these questions from, who here is actually doing startups, and it's the first time they're doing a startup? Raise your hand. 1, 2. Okay, so the rest of you are either not doing startups, or you've done startups before. Raise your hand. Okay, and the rest, they're corporates. Okay, good to know. So, but it's interesting that now I'm getting this question all the time. I'm having people saying, oh, dude, things are so bad in the startup community. And I'm like, you haven't seen Mordor. You don't know the Eye of Sauron. You've never experienced that. So I would like to have you guys share what it was like before, because it was really hard to do startup things, and how much better, even though it's not perfect, how much better it is now. So, Inés?
Basically 4 years ago, I would say like 2010, 2009, there was almost nothing in Porto where I come from. So there was a very small group of startups. We already had an incubator that was recently launched, but it was just starting, and what we saw back then was a few entrepreneurs, not enough support, not enough tools for them to actually develop their business ideas, and it was difficult actually. So we didn't have an ecosystem. So now we complain that we might not have an ecosystem, but we do, comparing to what we had in 2010, where people were just doing things on their own, not actually getting support from different organizations or also the government. So there's a huge change. I remember in 2010, I think I went to all conferences, or almost all conferences in Portugal, on technology. There was not much on entrepreneurship, more on technology, but it was just the start. And there was like this small group that I could see all the time in the different conferences, and now that group is much bigger. So I think we are definitely getting there, and I'm very excited what is going to happen in the next few years.
Pretty cool. Paolo, what about Italy?
Right. In Italy, I can't say it was better. I mean, 7 years ago, there was very little. In terms of investors, there was basically nothing around. Then we had a number of things that happened. So I must say, we had a US ambassador in Italy who was an investor. And when he came and wanted to invest in our country, he didn't find anything. So he started something he called Partnership for Growth. And from that, so it was Mr. Spogli, and from that on, a lot of things started happening. So the first events in 2007, 2008 were very much institutional. Then in 2010, we had our first startup weekend in Italy. And now we have one every second week, basically, and all over the country. On the side of investors, the most things that are happening are about 6-7 years ago, there were 100 business angels, whereas now, also thanks to the kick-in of a recent law that allows for tax discounts up to 20% or 19%, depending on your profile of investment, business angels are becoming more and more active. So it's an exciting time in Italy as well. Things are really, really changing with respect to this desert.
Despite the government.
The government is helping, actually. And
nice.
that's the news. I think we're going to talk about it later. Yeah.
Great. Pedro, what about in Lisbon?
Yeah.
Because you guys started after Porto. Porto was the first city to do fully blown startup things. Or am I wrong? Maybe I'm wrong. Here we go.
I think my perspective is that I agree completely. I think 5 years ago, we started in Barrera, we started in end of 2009. So I would say that mainly what happened before, now it's completely different, is the actors the critical mass is much higher, and they are connected within the country and also within different ecosystems. And I think this benchmark for other hubs is really relevant, because entrepreneurs, investors, everyone were just looking for themselves. And now they are much more connected, and they see abroad, they see what are the trends. So there's a completely different way of how things are done that happened certainly the last years. Of course, because of the economic crisis, the entrepreneurship became quite a fashionable thing to support and to talk about. But I think although governments and a lot of the feeders, like the Brazils like to say, got very involved, I think the good thing is that the ecosystem started to become led really by the entrepreneurs and by organizations, like by TAI, like the Startup Pirates, which are the entrepreneurs that leave the thing and are really pushing towards the ecosystem. In our perspective, when we started, there was nothing. So what we felt as we need to do a lot of things to bring the community together. So a lot of events. We start organizing the TEDx Edges. Inés was also the Startup Weekend. Inés was also part of that. So we did bigger events like the Explorers Festival. Silicon Valley comes to Lisbon. We did a lot of accelerators. We partner with Seed Camp, partner with Founder Institutes, did Beta Start, launch a big accelerator like the Lisbon Challenge. I think all this activity started to really create a critical mass, and so we start seeing things were happening, and concrete things were happening. So investors start to have to do co-investments with international players, and we start seeing, for example, in the case of Portugal, the first investments done by Seed Camp, or now investments made by Y Combinator. They really push the level of the ecosystem and how the ecosystems are perceived. And I think now the southern countries are much stronger. Another thing that also happened in the last years at the European level is the Startup Europe thing. One of the things that has done is made players collaborate. For example, we are involved in a few consortiums of accelerators throughout Europe, also with here Spain, Teton Valley, and in Italy with H Farm, sorry, and France, Le Camping. And I think this collaboration, Inés also did a huge thing with Startup Pirates around the Europe, and the Startup Exchange and the tour. This was really important to connect the dots and create critical mass.
Okay, so the next question, I think it's a little bit unique for you guys because you have a unique perspective on what's going on in the ecosystems. And I personally know this because I get this question all the time. How many of you here are from Spain? Raise your hands. So most of you. Okay. So for the ones that are from Spain, this is a typical question I get from most startups is, there is no money in Spain. If you're a startup, it's like there is no investment in Spain. There is no money in Spain. If you're an investor, you'll say there are no startups in Spain, you know? And I think it's a typical stuff that you hear all the time. But when you're on the inside and you actually have the numbers and you're dealing with this every day, you know that some things are not 100% true and that the needs of the startups and the investors are slightly different from what most people perceive on the outside. So what would you guys say is what's most needed right now for the startups in your ecosystems?
I think several things. Right now, I think we have enough, or almost enough, I would say, investors and business angels and different funds investing in the startups. I think most of them are investing with like 300,000, 500,000, even more, and maybe we should start investing a little bit earlier, like less money for them to start. I think also another thing that I think we need is still quite expensive to have a company in Portugal. So you have to pay social security and all that. I think it's becoming easier, but still I think there's a lot to do in that front. Sometimes I feel that the government should like get out of the way because it's the easiest way for startups to move forward. But I think there are some things in terms of facilitating the whole process that are quite good. But I think overall I think everything is already in place. So we have the incubators, we have the accelerators, we have companies going to seed camp and a Y Combinator, we have investors investing in startups. I think it's a question of having a more mature startup ecosystem where we have entrepreneurs that already exit, so they have money, they are giving back to the ecosystem, they are now investors. We have investors that already made a lot of money, so they are a little bit less risk averse. So that I think is a question of more of time and maturity than anything else, because I think the things are already there. I think it will take some time to get to like the level of London or Berlin, but still, I'm very confident with what we have.
Yeah, I think everyone here agrees we should create the startup republic or something like that, and hand out visas and hand out things for our guys.
Yeah.
Paolo.
Yeah, you touched on a point I wanted to touch on. Well, a premise, first of all, I totally agree. The first thing is about getting a more mature ecosystem. And when you start or you want to mature an ecosystem, I use this metaphor. It's as if you were standing on a parabolic floor and want to keep all the balls up. You can't just grab two because the others would fall. So you must keep taking all the balls together until there's sufficient mass that keep them together with gravity force. So that's kind of the thing you need to do when you start an ecosystem. You can't act only on two things. You must act 360 degrees. But this said, I think it's one point, going more concrete, one point I see we're missing on the startup side is managerial competencies. We have a lot of technical people who come out with great ideas, but transforming those ideas into an actual company is not always the case, that they can do it. So where do these competencies come from? An MBA, I doubt. They might come from other pieces of the ecosystem, like small, medium enterprises that can give these competencies and access to commercial channel, or big corporations. Second point is a cultural thing. So we need more of an international culture of entrepreneurship. So people to travel, we need people to go to Spain, Portugal from Italy, but also, of course, the UK, of course, Silicon Valley, New York, etc. And we need people to come and see our countries and do entrepreneurship there. So again, like Italy, and we, from TechPix, we kind of contributed on this, came out with a startup visa last June 24th. And that is a big step forward. It's still a little step in the whole picture, but and it would be welcome that all countries in Europe get some grip on this and an action to facilitate the mobility of entrepreneurs. Then, like, of course, funding. So public funding, yes. Private funding, better. Best to start an ecosystem, we think, is matching fund of the public to follow the private. So the public should release the power of deciding where to invest and co-invest with private investors. That is a win-win that gives a leverage on the private investors for the private investors, and takes off the role of knowing the market, of public administrators who don't spend their time looking at the market, so they don't know, actually. So that's what we're doing as well in Italy, and for TechPix in particular, we just rolled out an initiative like this in the northeast of Italy.
It's interesting that you talk about the part of management, because I hear, how many of you here are technical guys? By technical, engineering, physics, whatever. Raise your hand if you're technical. Few of you. The rest, you're marketing, business, and stuff like that, more or less. So it's typical that I get this thing all the time from people saying, oh, but I know about marketing. Can I work on a startup? Or I don't believe I can work on a startup. And I'm just telling, for those of you that are non-technical, is actually a real problem, what you just said. And it's becoming more and more problematic every year, where startups are growing and we need better management for the startups, better growth, better sales teams, better internationalization teams, and we don't have that. We don't have experts in
I
that.
actually think that's probably one of the biggest challenges that we are going to face in Portugal in the next 2 years, is because right now everyone is looking for technical people, so everyone is like in a fight with each other to get the best programmers, but we don't have enough supply of managers, of business developers, of sales, of marketing, people with experience that have a sense of how technology and how the startup world works and can actually add value to the startups.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be the biggest challenge.
Pedro.
Yeah, I would say talent for sure. Retaining, attracting the right talent. Although we are starting to see that startups that are doing well are...
Do you guys hear there?
We are starting to see a lot of startups are getting more successful, and yeah, they are creating a new labor force that are an amazing source of talent for the new startups that are coming. But it's really tough for startups to attract the right talent and to have some of those skills. Maybe there's some laws and stock options and things like that that should also be more flexible. On the capital side, I think maybe a bit more pre-seed money will be needed. Also a bit more later stage, because the problem is that all the big startups that are doing well, they have to go to the US. So Europe is constantly losing the best startups to the US. So we have to have investors here that are able to keep the startups here. I think another thing is we need more exits. It's a traditional thing, but it's true, especially in Portugal. We don't have real champions in startups. We have 3 failed IPOs, and a few startups are on the Gartner map of the next IPOs. This will be very important to have more exits. And on the exit side, also a new behavior of the big corporations, because we need more trail sales, especially because the European market is not so much consumer driven because it's more fragmented than the US. So a lot of the most successful businesses are more B2B or B2B2C. So you need to see more acquisition, more trade sales, even acqui-wires from big companies for all these startups that are coming out of the ecosystem. Otherwise, they will die, and a lot of this innovation will be kind of lost. I think this is most of the things we need to see. Maybe also, I think we're not there yet, but to hear the temptation of governments and to lead too much the ecosystem and then killing the initiatives of the private sector. So the ecosystem needs a lot of new players. Those players have to be encouraged. So you need a long-term perspective and vision, because now that the economic situation looks a little bit better, people are no longer so much interested in entrepreneurship. It's better to talk about financial markets again and other stuff and real estate. So you need long-term. We need more 20 years of this. So it will be really important that we don't change and shift a strategy along the way. And this is, and at European level, we are too much dependent on the fund cycles of the European Commission, and we should be less. So we need a more fluid economy. Maybe that's also by looking more abroad. So startups should look more abroad in terms of markets where they should address their products.
Okay, so this is interesting. How many of you here have actually traveled to Europe in the last, let's say, 6 months without counting vacations? Okay? So not that many. So this is exactly what we were just talking about, the moving around. How many of you here are investors? Anyone working for investors? 1, 2, 3? Okay. So the next question is a little bit for you guys. I think one of the major issues, and we are seeing the change here in Spain, is we're having more and more co-investments from external funds, from Axel partners, index partners, Balderton Capital. And so I remember when I was in Lisbon last time, I was asking you guys, like, are you seeing these things in Portugal? And I'm pretty sure in Italy too. If I was an investor and I wanted, either if I'm a local investor or I'm a foreign investor and I want to do something in Portugal or in Italy, what would you suggest? What should I take into account? Where should I be careful, etc.?
I think you should go to the Beta Investment Day that happened last week, so I think it's a good place to start. I think there are you can go to the three main cities, or for Braga, Porto, Coimbra, and Lisbon. There you have incubators. In Braga you have Startup Braga. In Porto you have UPTech. In Coimbra you have Instituto Pedro Nunes, and in Lisbon you have Beta and Startup Lisboa. And I think these are good places to start looking, to start meeting the ecosystem, because all these places also have connections with investors. Then we are also seeing more and more demo days. So Beta has the Lisbon Challenge demo day. Startup Lisboa also has its own demo day. We also see that in Braga and Porto. So we are also seeing these kind of events. I think this is our good ways to start. We also see that, for example, Portugal Ventures, that the financial or the investment arm from the government is also looking for international co-investor. They already have an office in Boston and in Silicon Valley to be closer to these markets and also to these investors. So I think we are also already seeing investments, co-investments. We are also seeing Caixa Capital, that is a fund from the Caixa Geral de Depósitos, our biggest bank, investing at Seed Camp. So they are part of the new fund, the 30 million fund that they have. So we are seeing that not only we are trying to attract investors to co-invest with our Portuguese investors, but also investing in international funds, which I think is a good sign and a sign of maturity.
Paolo? Right. Well, I could repeat most of the things there. So in Italy as well, there are many incubators and accelerators, demo days, etc. So you're invited to come to TechPix Demo Day. We take international teams, not only Italian teams. So there are people coming also from Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, US, UK, etc. So, but I would like to add a couple of more things. So if you are an angel investor, in Italy there are, and you're looking for syndicating with business angels. In Italy there are two big business angel groups, IBAN, who just recently separated from IBAN, and the Italian Angels for Growth, that are of the two, they're currently the most active in syndication. So I would advise to contact those. Again, venture capitalists, I guess they have their own contacts to invest in syndication if they're interested. Keep an eye on TechPix again. We are bringing to Italy international people to start companies that are in Italy and not only. So one is in the UK at the moment, and one is thinking about moving to the US as well. But they keep in Southern Europe, in Italy or elsewhere, they keep their, one in Portugal, by the way, they keep their back end. I just met yesterday two entrepreneurs from Portugal and one from Italy that teamed up together, and they're working both in Portugal and Italy at the same time.
Yeah, my question was going more around that part. If I'm an investor, am I going to have a LLC in Italy or in Portugal? And can I create a UK LTD to move it, or an LLC in the US? I mean, what kind of structures or weird combinations you're seeing, as what you just said, like back-end team in Italy, front-end on marketing in the UK?
We are seeing that, like in Portugal, we are seeing people that have the development team in Lisbon or Porto or Braga, and then have the sales team in the US or in the UK. We are seeing more and more, actually, especially because with being part of I Combinator of 500 startups, they set up the company there, or they can set up in Portugal, but then they move there to be closer to the client. So I think that's one of the things. But it's difficult because, for example, Portugal Ventures, I think only invests in companies that are based in Portugal. So since they are one of the most important players, we are seeing that entrepreneurs actually have to start a company in Portugal. So it's...
So I think cross-border investment is really a big need at the European level. A lot of the investors in the southern countries are co-invested by European funds, and a lot of times that has a lot of strings attached to that. And but we are seeing more and more players that are co-investing. So to see more and more syndicates, it's really relevant. To see more cross LPs in funds, to funds that should be investors in early stage funds as a way to have deal flow, investing more in the accelerators funds. So I think the accelerators are a key player. So they have the critical mass at a certain ecosystem. So it's a good way for building a relationship of trust. Trust is a key thing. So for foreign investors with the accelerators, there are two things. One is to participate as mentors, because if you participate as mentors, you can engage with startups, you can engage with the ecosystem, and you start to build a relationship of trust and understanding better the ecosystem. And you also can be a syndicated investor with other co-investors locally, or you can be LP in the funds that are now starting to appear. At a later stage, it's always also about partnerships. It's partnering with Portugal Ventures or Spirit Santos Ventures or S Ventures over there. So local partners, players that are active, but need to co-invest, because more and more we need more money to grow startups. So you cannot go alone. So you have to invest always with other players and globally. And I think AngelList and all these kind of movements are changing a lot the framework of investment and checking a bit the waters, and we are starting to see a lot of different ways of looking at things. A lot of times we like to talk about Bollerton and Index, and that it's sexy. We also like to have them in Portugal, but at this seed level, it's very important to engage networks of angels, and those are sometimes harder to reach. But there's a big trend at the European level as well of networks of investors, and I think you have to step into that. And it's a question of trust and time and building relationship, and start acting with the same rules. I think one of the things we need to see is term sheets agreement at the European level, starting to understand what should be the common term sheet, trying to understand that those term sheet has to be ready to be for US investments as well. Not being paranoid about having the fiscal headquarter in your country, but might be UK or Delaware if it makes sense. So starting to have a common framework for these things that are really relevant when you're closing deals is something that would be nice to see some kind of convergence. Maybe things that I'm starting to see, angel schools. I think we need more angel schools at the European level to kind of not educate, but create a common framework of work among investors.
This is very interesting, because I think 5 or 6 years ago, no one in Southern Europe was talking about going European. And now what I'm hearing all the time is move around Europe, do things in Europe, collaborate. And I think that one of the worst things that we have in Southern Europe is the collaboration part. I think everyone has suffered it, how everyone looks internally to their own stuff. They think their stuff is the best thing, and the neighbors is pretty bad. It's funny, I recently had someone asking me, oh, I see a lot of people in Spain, but they don't talk to each other. And I'm like, no, everyone knows each other. You know, we meet and we know each other, we're friends, but we just don't work together, which is the funny thing, you know? So tackling into that collaboration, and how have you seen that collaboration? How important is it? And tapping also into how are universities, how is the people that supposedly are doing research and innovation, how is that connecting and collaborating with the startup ecosystem?
So in terms of collaboration, I think we still have a long way to go. So we see I think we see the players, so the facilitators of entrepreneurship collaborating more and more. I don't think that we see the startups collaborating more and more. So the other day I was with two entrepreneurs, they actually in the same building, but they didn't know each other. And they have been there for more than 6 months now. So what we see is like people don't talk to each other. They are in their own office. I'm here, I'm okay, I'm doing my thing. I leave, I go home, no one cares. We don't see those collaborations. For example, in Porto, we organize the Porto Startup Coffee. We see a lot of entrepreneurs going there. And for the ones that go there for the first time, it's always like a shock because like people here are talking with each other, are really sharing and learning together. And this is something that unfortunately is not very common. So I think we still have a long way to go. I'm not saying that it's all bad, because I think there are a few things that are good, but we still have a long way to go in terms of collaboration, because startups have a lot to learn with each other, and we need more of that. That's on one hand. On the other hand, in terms of the researchers, I think the universities are desperate to have the researchers actually doing something with their research, but it's not an easy thing to do. We see a lot of researchers that's exactly what they want to do. We see companies that it's difficult for them to look at the universities and actually take that research and do something with it. It's always the same companies that do that. The big ones that has good innovation departments that are able to go to the university and take those innovations. But the rest, most of the companies, most of the SMEs don't have that space and that structure. So I think there's a huge potential there. Right now we are working with, for example, 4 companies. The 4 companies are from the health tech sector. They have very interesting projects, but they still have to transition from a researcher to an entrepreneur. And that transition is difficult. Unfortunately, I think not everyone will be able to successfully make it, but they need help, and there are a few things already trying to do it.
Paolo? So, I think, thanks. I think that there's different levels of maturity in an ecosystem. Until now, we have had hard work in getting the ecosystem started. So it was kind of natural that everybody was looking at his own little garden. And I think the time is now to start expanding and building on the network that is also, growing in Europe among people that know each other, and expand that network more so that there's more collaboration. It's always hard to keep a communication channel alive because everybody's busy. So one thing we're doing internally in our ecosystem, we're sharing a calendar that is at least telling each other what kind of initiatives and when the other people are doing. But on the other side that Inés was also touching upon was the collaboration between technology providers and management, those with marketing and management skills that are not forcibly the same thing. That is something that needs to be cured, but it's a lot of a cultural thing. So what we're doing is also pushing entrepreneurial education and skill sets onto the tech guys, including researchers, that sometimes don't want to hear about it because they don't make their career upon entrepreneurship. But this is becoming more and more an urge for them, as well as public spending on research is contracting. So there's, again, the time is now. There's an opportunity there.
About collaboration. Collaboration is a tough game. It's playing the non-zero-sum game. It's very much counterintuitive. So, because we want to collaborate, but a lot of times we also need enough resources to survive, and sometimes it's not easy to play that game. Also, we see the benefits of it. We also react a lot to that. So, and sometimes it's easier to collaborate abroad at the European level than in your country. We collaborate a lot, and we've collaborated a lot in the past, but sometimes we have to also to fight for our resources. So, and and sometimes your velocity in growing it's faster than the velocity of the ecosystem is growing, and so you have to be very intelligent in how you manage the equation of resources. But we have to trust and play the non-zero-sum game. Also, I think in collaboration we need the cluster model of, and what I think it's interesting, and we are seeing in the aerospace, we are seeing in automotive industries, is innovation, business model innovation, or innovation at the business model, but how you share the benefits of a business model within a cluster. So if we can start seeing how to set that, how can we create a model that everyone benefits a bit with that, and then by collaborating together we have some incentives that are aligned. This is something relevant, tough, very tough to do, but all the biggest challenges in the world that I've seen being solved, a lot of them had to do that. And I think it's also something that we have to go. Regarding universities, I think they're also waking up, especially the South Portuguese universities. I think a lot of them were very much closed to themselves, more research and the papers. They have to change the way they do things and to link to the market in a different way. But it's again about finding a framework of communication. It's like open innovation. Doing open innovation between universities and corporations is already tough. Doing that with startups, it's even tougher. I think the equation is bringing the three to the table, but it's tough. And we need more and more people that are skilled at managing the relationships and the language and the motivation of those players. But in terms of entrepreneurs, it's good that we see a lot of people coming and willing to be entrepreneurs. At the same time, I was reading Paul Graham's post, I think it was October, and he was saying, careful, because when you're young, it's the time for you to do stupid stuff and to and to travel and to do things that are not able to do later in life. I did that. I did a lot of mistakes when I was younger. Now I feel that I can be an entrepreneur because I have less to compromise with. But so I think we have to influence entrepreneurial spirits. Not everyone has to become entrepreneurs, but they have to have an entrepreneurial mindset. So that it's a DNA that goes throughout their lives.
I would say that you're still young, my friend.
Yeah.
So before we close, I would love to get some questions from the audience. We have 2-3 minutes, so if anyone wants to ask something. Oh, we have a shy audience. Interesting. Come on, someone. No questions? No question whatsoever? I can't believe this. There we go. ¿Tenemos un micro? There you go. I present this, I move the mic, give the mic.
Is it working? Yeah, it's working. So, by the way, I'm Rafael. My question is, if you could give only one advice to someone that is trying to create a community, an entrepreneurial community in a city where there's nothing there, what would it be?
I couldn't hear.
Repeat the question.
Okay, is it better now?
Yep.
Yeah.
So you're gonna
Okay, my question is, if you could give only one advice to someone that would like to build a community in a city where there's nothing related to entrepreneurship, what would it be?
Yeah, I'll repeat the question.
Where there's nothing.
So, if you're a newbie and you're in a place, remote area with fucking nothing, how would you start something there?
I think the first one.
What would be your advice?
I think the first one to have in mind is that you have to be patient because things will take very, very long time to actually build something. But I think I will give you like two advices. One is to make sure that everything that happens has a consequence. So if you are doing something for the community, make sure that relationships are built, make sure that partnerships are created, make sure that people are getting something out of the events, the different initiatives that we organize. And the second thing is make sure that it's done for the community, by the community. I think most of when I see events done by organizations that are just there, sometimes taking an opportunity and going away, people start feeling they feel that they can trust these organizations. So make sure that you are there, make sure that you show that you are there, make sure that you are there for the long term, and make sure that everything that you do has a consequence.
So, right, I have a few pieces of advice because I did it. So, so when I arrived in the little town of Trento, northeast of Italy 5 years ago, there was nothing. I totally agree with what Brad Feld says in his book about startup community. Don't be patient, actually, but be long time. You need a long time commitment, but you don't be patient. Give big blasts, one after the other, and try to get as many people as possible working on the innovation scene. So one thing that changed our startup scene was the first startup weekend we did. Disclaimer, I'm a startup weekend facilitator. I love the format. Still, we gathered 120 people, and some of them had never heard about startups or entrepreneurship before. And after that, we built the community on Facebook, and we started having more and more things. So, run a startup weekend.
In my opinion, I don't know if you can hear. Sorry.
Perdona.
Because in my opinion, I don't know, Lisbon is a small city, but it already has some critical mass. But it's long-term vision, is persistence, but it's like startups have to do it as well. Fake it until you make it, I think. We have to shout and to say much more than we are doing, and to have to fake a bit. And also, when we are small, maybe we have to find a core competence or something that we are good, and and that we can be genuinely recognized by that. Can be an industry or something, and maybe launching challenges, trying to create some kind of critical mass that can attract people from globally. And think globally, more and more clusters are networks of relationships, so we're not alone. As long as we have a focus, we can say something that is recognized. Like universities, the attractors. You have to have something that is able to attract others by the quality, the noise, whatever. And I think if we focus on that, have a long-term perspective, things will happen eventually. Sometimes no, but...
Well, okay, we're actually out of time. So, guys, thank you very much for the audience. Guys, thank you so much. Big round of applause to our speakers.